Hi everyone. This is Joseph Ng from Hong Kong Baptist University. Actually, I'm from the Department of Computer Science working on IoT and smart lampposts, if you can say, and also smart city. Maybe that's why I'm here to chair the sections. And welcome to panel 3. And the panel title is Prospect of Smart City Development. We have 3 papers, which will be presented by Mr. Kevin Lai first, and then it will be Professor Masaru Yarime and also Professor Wilson Wong. Okay, so I guess we can start. I assume that we will spend like 20 to 25 minutes for the presentation, and let us have all the question and answer at the very end after the 3 presentation. So Kevin, you have the screen.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for chairing this session. I'm Mr. Kevin Lai, and I'm the Senior Research Assistant of this project, Trust and a Smart City. Smart City Index is actually my research focus. So today my presentation will be about the research and design of the Smart City Index. Today's presentation will be in 4 parts. So first, I will talk about the background information of Smart City Index. And second, I will introduce the evaluation framework that I developed to evaluate the selected current smart city index. After presenting the analysis and results, I will also suggest 3 features I think should be included when designing a new smart city index. So firstly, about the Smart City Index. Smart City Index actually is an assessment tool which is quite influential for cities because the results are always used by the cities to plan future development, to assess strengths and weaknesses, and in particular for those high-ranked cities, they always use the result of Smart City Indexes to promote and attract foreign investment and tourists. However, while studying those smart city indexes, diversity can also be observed, especially in definition, location like Asia, Europe, content like those smart city dimension, the smart governance or smart mobility, and also in structure, like if it's emphasizing on the technologies or emphasizing on the citizen engagement. And the diversity can not only be observed in different countries, but even cities in the same country can also have difference because they have distinct interpretation of the smart city. Using Hong Kong as an example, here shows 9 selected smart city index and the rank of Hong Kong respectively. And you can see, like in the second row, the digital city index, Hong Kong actually ranked 4th out of 136 cities, which is obviously quite good. But in comparison, like the last row, the smart city index, Hong Kong ranked 41st out of 118 cities, which is in comparison not that good. So you can already observe there is a distinct inconsistency of Hong Kong's performance in different smart city index. And that's also the reason why I, at the first page, want to study smart city index, because I want to know the behind reason of this kind of differentiation. So before I go in depth into the smart city index, I will first talk about the smart city definition. By studying smart city, we can actually realize that until now, we still don't have a general accepted smart city definition. But for this project, based on literature review and also study of the existing indexes, I and Professor Ko, we both come up a smart city definition, which is as below. We believe smart city is the municipality using different types of information and communication technologies, including digital devices, sensors for data collection, and Internet of Things, so that besides promoting the city in the digital world and ensuring the cybersecurity, the 6 dimensions of economy, mobility, environment, people, living, and governance can be improved. In particular, this 6 dimension actually, coincidentally, is the same as the Hong Kong Smart City Blueprint's dimensions. So after defining the smart city, now I will talk about the selected smart city indexes for evaluation. So here shows the 6 of the smart city indexes. 3 of them, they are research-based, and 3 of them, they are market-oriented. So research-based is a bit easier to to explain. Research-based data developed by institutions or university, which is purely for research purpose. But for those market-oriented, they are developed by private company, and they are mostly used for, like, for example, promoting the marketing service or even like generate revenue. In these 6 market indexes, two of them they are from Spain, 2 of them they are from Singapore, 1 is from the United States, and then one of that is from Australia. And then the next slide shows we're going to introduce the evaluation framework I use to evaluate these 6 market indexes. So the first category is credibility. Credibility is about the background of the developer, like if it's well known, how's the reputation, and if the business orientation of the developer, like if, as I said before, if it is research oriented or it is market oriented. For the next category is the reliability. It also has 3 indicators, and it is easy to explain because this category is mostly about how many times they got referred by the other third parties. So it's like if they have referred by the municipalities, they have referred by scientific publication, or even by the public media. Methodology is about how they evaluate the cities, like if the information is transparent enough, or what kind of data they use for evaluation, like secondary data or primary data. Another criterion is the versatility, and this one is a bit complicated because that will have a look into the features of each smart city index to see, for example, if they have some special features to deal with cities with different background, or how many smart city dimensions they have covered out of that 6 smart city dimension. And the last criterion is the precision. So in total, my framework have 5 criteria and also have 12 indicators. So here shows the evaluation framework and the measurement. And of course, I will not go through that one by one because it is quite a lot. But I can introduce that in short. So for each criterion, there is 5 points in total, which means if a market index had the full score, then it will score 25 points as the maximum. Let me maybe pick this indicator, the review by the municipalities, in the reliability criterion example. So if that market index it had been coded by some governmental or official document, then it will have 1 score. But if it have never been coded by any of those official documents, then it will have 0 score in this indicator. So that comes this analysis result. You can see for this 6 smart city index, city's emotion index has the highest score. It obtained 22 score out of 25. For the others, the score actually are quite similar, except the one, the digital city index, it scored 15 out of 25, which is the lowest. But that being said, this score is still higher than half of the full score, so the performance is still acceptable. So now I present the observation of these 2 indexes, the highest score index and the lowest score index. And you can see, for example, in the city's emotion index, it obtained full score in 3 criteria: the credibility, reliability, and methodology. And it also performed quite okay in the other 2 criteria. But for the digital city index, it especially have quite bad performance in the reliability criterion and also methodology criterion. So now I will also talk about each criterion one by one. So for the credibility, one of the analysis I use is called reasonableness assessment analysis, and I'll explain it a bit. So what I mean here is using smart city government and the smart city index. So these last 2 rows as an example. These 2 smart city index, they are developed by a company based in Singapore. And I want to see, well, if, for example, here you can see, they rank Singapore as the best smart city out of like 100 cities. But have a look in the other smart city index. Singapore is also not that bad performance, but not as good as the best. So that's actually not substantiate why these two smart city index choose their hometown, their home city as the best smart city, and then this damage their overall credibility analysis. So that is the behind principle of this analysis. I want to see how they rank their home city, and is that fair or like depends on the other smart cities' performance. So the next one is a precision analysis. That is a bit complicated because I try to compare the rank of the cities with a rank called reality performance, which I kind of developed by myself based on the real-time data, free real-time data. They are the total website host in city, total IP address in this city, and also top world website in this city. So using this free real-time data, I came up with this reality performance rank, and then I compare that with the other rank in this smart city index. And then if the differences is less than 2, which means they are consistent, and then that is validate. So you can see, like for example, the innovation city index and the smart city government, they have all 4 cities, they have consistent rank, which means of course they have the highest score in this precision criterion. But for the global e-government survey and the smart city index, only 1 city, Berlin, have the consistent performance with the reality performance rank. So they have the lowest score in this criteria. So the next is the last 3 criteria. They are the reliability, methodology, and versatility. And I will not really go in depth to introduce each criterion, but I will just generally talk about that. So like for reliability, most indexes, they have satisfying performance except the digital city index and the smart city government. For the methodology criterion, digital city index and the innovation city index, they have the lowest scores, especially for the innovation city index, because it required purchase to unlock the detailed information. This actually limits availability of free access information, and it make us question if this smart city index really have high quality or not. But in contrast, like for the city emotion index, the global e-governance survey and the smart city government, they all have full point in this criterion because they use data from the officially published report at international organizations like United Nations or like the World Bank. So for the versatility criterion, all indexes have above average performance because, for example, all indexes, they have separate ranking regarding the continent, which we deem as a measurement of the regional context sensitivity. So now we have recognized city emotion index as the best smart city index out of the selected 6. I would like to show you the statement of Hong Kong from them. So like how they view Hong Kong from their perspective. And actually, Hong Kong's performance is quite good, especially in technology dimension. It got the first rank, is the best city out of the 174 cities, mainly because the almost 100% of population in Hong Kong, for example, had used mobile phone. They have mobile phones, and also almost 100% of the population, they have at least one mobile network available. So like this kind of data makes Hong Kong as the best city in this technology dimension. On the other hand, Hong Kong also performed quite well in the international projection dimension. It got 4th out of 174 cities, which means Hong Kong is an important global financial center connecting to the other international cities. So the last part will be about the 3 features I want to suggest to develop a new smart city index. So the first one is the type of indicators, the second is the smart city domain, and the third one would be the context sensitivity measurement. So first I will talk about the type of indicator, which is inspired when I was doing the analysis for the versatility criterion. So for this analysis, I use analysis called essential quality analysis, which I define indicators into 3 categories: the essential indicators, the unique indicators, and the unrelated indicators. So from the right-hand side table, you can see, like here, Wi-Fi hotspot have been referred by 4 smart city index of 6, and that make this indicator as the essential indicators because A is a common idea and is generally agreed by most of the smart city analysis. That is the definition of the essential indicators. And you can see for unique indicator, it doesn't mean that unique indicator is unrelated because using this one, the citizen perception as an example, these indicators only exist in smart city index, this one, but And that is perfectly matched with the definition, the smart city definition of this index. It represents their special feature. It makes this index stand out from the others. So all those unique indicators should also be additionally considered when we develop our own ideal smart city index. So the second features is the smart city domain. In addition to the 6 smart city dimensions, the economy, environment, governance, living, mobility, and society, I additionally suggest to add 3 more dimensions in the whole smart city categories. They are the perception, technologies, and privacy based on the other smart city index research. So in total, we have 9 categories. And what I mean soft and hard domain is, hard domain means the infrastructure, and then the soft domain means the policy or the governance in a city. So I also suggest under those categories, indicators should be differentiated to soft and hard domain to cover all the aspects. Because let me take economy as an example. E-payment belongs to the hard domain because it depends on the infrastructure in a city. Like if they have installed the machine to make the contactless transfer payment possible. So this kind of infrastructure oriented development. But for ICT employees, that will belongs to the soft domain because then it is about the policy or even like the orientation or the rules of the company. So that would be the soft domain. So that is my second suggestion. And then the last one, the third features is the context sensitivity measurement. So I had talked about the definition of smart city, but for smart city index, because during our research we had observed 2 main directions of smart city development. The first type is big data policy, and the second type is the sustainable smartness. So for big data policy, it means cities emphasizing on smart governance by maybe using sensors or even data collection to improve their city, the city service. And the sustainable smartness is like the cities emphasizing smart environment to be more sustainable. So I observed these 2 types of smart city development, and then together with the number of population of each cities, I developed this table of grouping of cities show that we can ensure like-for-like comparison when we are doing the smart city index analysis, because we believe that can make a fair analysis for each city, and it will reduce the differentiation of the ranking. Here, the differentiation of weighting also help to ensure the fairness comparison, because you can see here for the big data policy, this smart city development direction, economy and governance, of course, they are the smart city dimension which are always emphasized in this direction, and of course they deserve to have higher ratio. And for the sustainable smartness, environment and society, these 2 dimensions, they have higher ratio because they are the most emphasized dimension in this direction. So which means the weighting, the usage of weightings here is to reflect the differences of smart city concept. So I would like to sum up a bit the smart city index research here. So most of the index, they are underperformed because their nature as market-based tools, because of the confidentiality. So most of the data is not really open and is not freely accessed, which is perfectly present the dilemma between revenue and knowledge sharing. And it's also the difference between the research-based and market-oriented assessment tools. So we are not saying the market-oriented assessment tool is relatively worse than research-based, like those index developed by those like institution or university. But the thing is, because more of the information can only be accessed by purchase. So when there is a freely accessible index there, why the other customer would like to choose those market-oriented assessment tools, that is one of the concern. And second, I also talk about there is actually a limitation in this research, which is the inconsistent of the years. Some of the index I use here, unfortunately, they are not updated annually, but some of them they are. So which make some of the smart city index, their latest edition, they are in 2021, but some of that they're probably in 2019 or even 20, which of course it will influence the preciseness of indexes. So for example, in those the precision criterion previously, two index had the full score because also coincidentally, these two index they have the annual published pattern, and that two index they are in 2021, and maybe that's the reason why they have the full score in the precision and which match with the reality performance. So before I end my presentation, I would like to also link my Smart City Index research to our Smart City Survey of this project. So in our Smart City Survey, we had a question 11. We asked the interviewees about which Asian city, this 6 Asian city, they think is doing the best in the development of smart city. And you can see, when we compare the two results, the City Emotion Index, the one we deem as the best, it ranked Hong Kong as 10 out of 174 cities, which is of course really great. But in our Smart City Survey, it is just better, slightly better than Taipei, which is the second worst. While when we have a look in Shenzhen, Shenzhen was ranked by the City Emotion Index 109 out of 174 cities, which is of course not that good. But in our survey, it is the second best. It's only behind Singapore. So it shows the subjective feeling of the citizens toward the cities is totally different from the objective assessment from the real-time data, like City Emotion Index. They evaluate cities by the data, like the GPD, like the coverage or the percentage of usage of technologies in city. But that is totally different, and it substantiates the inclusion of perception in the smart city index evaluation, because that also influences a lot if the city is truly going to a smart city development direction or not. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have Mr. Masaru Yarime to present his work on data governance? So you have the stage.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor NG. My name is Masaru Yarime. Currently, I'm working at the Division of Public Policy at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And I also have an affiliation with the Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo. Yes, I think particularly in recent years, we have observed the emergence of new technologies, and particularly in the context of smart cities, that we see a kind of merging of physical, digital, and virtual worlds. So I think that now we really need to think about this kind of interaction between physical world and then digital twins, and then the metaverse, which is somehow getting a lot of attention in recent years. So essentially, I think we really need to understand the emerging ecosystem involving human and machines. So we can see this is emerging in different sectors and different aspects of smart cities, like transportation. You see autonomous vehicle, and then there was market transactions. We see a lot of autonomous transactions going on. And also in other societal areas and also political areas, we see a lot of the examples and also kind of incidents with regard to or the kind of intervention by trying to manipulating some of the behavior of humans. So I think increasingly in the context of smart cities, that particularly for policymakers, we really need to understand how humans and machines interact, and then what kind of interventions we can make based upon the understanding of human-machine interactions. So particularly in dealing with the urban challenges, and this is just example of using machine learning for climate change mitigation by installing all the sophisticated devices and equipments, collecting data and then analyzing data so that we can somehow introduce measures to tackle the CO2 emissions and also climate change mitigation and also adaptation. So that the cities can increase the resilience to disasters like typhoons and hurricanes and also floods. So as we just mentioned, that there are many opportunities that the smart cities can address. And so I just worked with my colleagues in different locations to see what are the key ideas and what are the key issues and concepts which are used in a particular local context. So we did a very simple comparative analysis of the papers and publications working on the smart cities between Sweden and Japan. So we did a kind of co-occurrence of words in publications by looking at Japan and also Sweden. And there are some similarities and differences. And with regard to similarities, we see some of the technological measures and equipment and the devices, including IoT and also EVs and others. But then we also see some differences between Sweden and also Japan. And for example, in the case of Japan, that we see some very specific technological measures and also emphasis on energy, and then that also the resilience to earthquake and also other disasters. So these are some of the issues that people are interested in doing research and also publication in this area. And then in the case of Sweden, we see the literatures which are discussing the citizens and the government roles and also the sustainability issues. So this is still a very limited kind of analysis of contents of publications in this area. But then you can see that there are kind of diversities in discussions and also narratives on the same idea of smart cities. So I think it's really important to look at how the specificities of the local conditions and context will be particularly important in establishing the kind of robust the system for dealing with all the challenges in smart cities. And then we did a kind of very detailed analysis of the one example of using blockchain for distributed energy systems. And we made a kind of review of literature and also based upon some cases of actual implementation of blockchain-based distributed energy systems in Japan. And as you can see that this is kind of schematic figure showing the households can generate electricity by putting solar panels on the top of the roof. And then also you can connect the EVs and also batteries so that we can exchange energy between households. So this is really a kind of new opportunities in somehow transforming energy system from a centralized system to a very distributed system, which would be expected to be more resilient to disasters, and also that would be more flexible and also efficient by utilizing all the very detailed information about the consumption and also production of energies in different locations. So we did some evaluation of different challenges, opportunities with regard to technological dimension, economic dimension, societal, environmental, and institutional dimension. So as you can see, there are actually many challenges we still need to tackle in the coming years. And especially with regard to the use of AI, this is also considered to be a very important technology in facilitating all the transactions between different households, because in a way that there are many households, and then that they have all the production and consumption, and then that how to manage these fluctuations of energy production and consumption involving many households would be a big challenge. So AI would be expected to play a very important role in managing these transactions, and then particularly the smart contracts would be very important in facilitating the smooth transactions. So these are really a kind of promising opportunities. But then that if we make interviews with all the stakeholders involved, and then that there are many challenges, particularly concerning data in peer-to-peer distributed systems, and the data availability and also accessibility, who should have access to the data, and then how to maintain the interoperability of data, including all the standards, and also the security issues, particularly how to secure data from attacks from malicious the actors, and then the data privacy would be a really big challenge, because now we really need to exchange data coming from individual households. So that could be really a source of various applications. And then the standardization is lacking. And then particularly now the European Union has introduced the GDPR. So that is also making impacts in the institutions in other countries. For example, Japan has recently made an agreement with the EU with regard to the equivalence of data protection, so that now it's possible to transfer data between EU and Japan, but that really requires the adjustment in all the legal and also institutional systems. So the data has really has become such a big topic in the area of smart city. So we did a kind of analysis of the digital twins as a policy tool for policymakers, and then what are the opportunities and challenges in utilizing digital twins by taking a look at the case of virtual Singapore. So yes, there are a lot of data and diverse, abundant data available from various parts of the city, from sophisticated devices and equipment, and then particularly the micro-level individual mobility data will be available in smart cities, and then that now these data are increasingly reflected in digital twins. So in this case of virtual Singapore. But then that there's a lot of concerns about privacy and also the availability and applicability for predictive simulations. So the policymakers will be interested in kind of simulation exercise with regard to what kind of policies will have would produce what kind of impacts. So in that sense, digital twins will be a kind of tool that the policymakers can potentially use to simulate all the policy interventions. But then that because of these concerns about the privacy and also applicability, we are somewhat trying to propose that we could think about using kind of synthetic data so that we can somehow generate data which are not actually involving the actual privacy data, so that we can still try to create all this data so that the AI can learn by using these synthetic data. But at the same time, we can address the challenge of protecting privacy. So this would be just one very preliminary analysis and also proposal. But then that as we discuss later, that to what extent that we can utilize synthetic data would be a big challenge in the sense that because that can be used for the fake the news and the fake the issues. To what extent that we can utilize synthetic data would be also creating a lot of challenges and problems, so that we really need to think about in the context of using data twins for policy tools. So in that sense, the privacy data, personal data would be particularly important in smart cities, and then that has been demonstrated in observing what happened in tackling the COVID-19, and especially in East Asia. As we observed that in many countries and regions in East Asia, including the China and the Hong Kong, and then the South Korea, and Singapore, and Taiwan, and others, that a lot of personal data were actually used, including the mobile phone data, GPS, transportation data, social media, credit cards, surveillance cameras. And at least initially, I understand that these measures are relatively successful in containing the spread and finding all the people who have been infected. Also monitoring the quarantine, and also the managing the entrance of the people to particular places. And then the mainland China has introduced the health codes, so that you can see that all the level of risks of different the people with a different history and backgrounds. But then that there's also obviously a concern, and particularly in the case of Singapore, that the data collected by using the contact tracing app are actually used for other purposes, and in that case, that the police used that information for police investigation. So there's a lot of the debates and a lot of opportunities and promises, but at the same time, that how we can manage data collected in smart cities, and to what extent that we can use these data for other purposes will be really a big challenge here. So in that sense, that we did kind of the survey research about how the COVID-19 dashboards are used in Hong Kong, and then that what are the people's attitudes and perceptions with regard to the use of data here. So I think everybody knows that the Hong Kong government has developed the COVID-19 dashboard, and then, as you can see, all the detailed information about all the cases, at least at the initial stage. And then you see the place, and also the gender, and also the age. So we did the survey research for about 800 citizens in Hong Kong, reflecting all the key characteristics of the Hong Kong, the whole population in Hong Kong. And then that, yes, what kind of information they looked at when they used the dashboard, and then all the cases and the locations, and the types of the cases, and the residence. And then that what kind of factors they think could be important in using the dashboards. They emphasize the trustworthiness, and also accuracy, and to some extent the legitimacy and comprehensiveness. And yeah, this was made, the survey was made in the 2021. So at least at the time, the relatively early stage of this the pandemic. And then the political consideration was not actually so important in the sense that at least at the early stage of tackling the COVID-19 pandemic in Hong Kong, that people had relatively high trust in the data provided by the government, and then that they somehow followed the instructions based upon this data. Yeah, we did also some more detailed analysis, particularly compared to the government dashboard and also the citizen dashboard, and then that there are some differences with regard to the willingness of the people to provide personal information. And yeah, we also asked what are the reasons that why they would not be willing to provide personal information, and then that there's, as you can see, the privacy and also data leakage. So these are well, not surprising, but these are still concerns to people here. And then that once we anonymize the data, and then what kind of information the people will be willing to provide to this the dashboard, and then that relatively large number of people, the health data, they can provide health data, location data, and also contact information and the others. So and then that we also try to somehow map different types of dashboards using different locations. And as you can see, relatively speaking, the Hong Kong and also Singapore and then Tokyo, this East Asian the dashboards are relatively more comprehensive and also involving personal data. And then that if you look at other cases like Amsterdam, Newcastle, these are relatively low in comprehensiveness and also the involvement of personal data. So reflecting upon the local conditions and context, we can see different degree of using personal data and other types of data in dashboards. So somehow we are also, we did also case the survey research with regard to how people would react to app for providing personalized health advice. So we created kind of mock-up for our app, which provides personalized health advice, and then changed some of the conditions, including what kind of information collected, and then what kind of data management system is introduced, and then who is in charge of managing the data. And then we try to see, we change these conditions randomly to ask the people, and then to see if there are any kind of differences in reactions to their willingness to use this kind of system. And then we are still analyzing this data, but then that we found that one factor is gender. It's in the sense that the female citizens will be more concerned about all the privacy issues. So that is one thing which we also need to think about in introducing this kind of apps in providing some data. So in that sense, the personalized data would be increasingly important for tackling other challenges. And then here we did also a survey study about the energy conservation behavior, particularly the air conditioning, the equipment in households. And then that we saw that some factors like their attitude to changing behavior, and also some of the economic factors, that they are somehow producing differences in reactions to different types of behavior. But then that increasingly there's a huge potential for utilizing more granular, more micro level data, so that potentially we could use micro targeting digital nudges so that we can induce the behavioral change for tackling climate change. So that would be really the direction I think that many companies and organizations are trying to move. But then that obviously there are concerns in the sense that to what extent that we can really actually change their behavior, and then that how we can effectively scale up this approach to drive societal transformation. And then obviously that we really need to be concerned about the possibility of manipulation, even though this is meant to be changing behavior for the social good, but this could be also used for other purposes, and so that in that sense, to what extent that we can allow this kind of paternalism or manipulation of micro data. So then that essentially we need to think about the three the aspects in managing data in smart cities: the individual rights, and then the interests of data holders, including the platform actors, big companies, then how, and then that we need to think about how we can use this data for public interest, like tackling climate change or pandemic. So now we are working with my colleagues to analyze more about the different approaches to data governance. I think the Professor Ma mentioned about data trust, and yes, there are many approaches to data governance, and data trust has been particularly emphasized increasingly by countries in Europe, like UK, and then also data cooperatives, which would be more bottom-up, grassroots approach, and then data commons, which is somehow similar to what we think about as common pool resources, or we can think about personal data stores and others. So I think there are increasingly many places are trying to use different kinds of approaches, and then so that now we really need to understand what's really going on by using different types of approaches. And then the data trust would be independent the entity for the managing data. So they make a kind of decision with regard to who has access to the data, and then who can use the data, and who can benefit from using the data. So we somehow try to establish an independent entity which is really in charge of managing data. So that is kind of one approach. And then another approach is, which is somewhat proposed by the Japanese government recently in the context of the super city. They try to create kind of data linkage platform, and then that they really try to focus on linking data, but not necessarily owning the data. So this is more of a decentralized approach, but then the facilitating data linkage and exchange from different data holders and for different applications. So especially, I think I also am analyzing the kind of narratives of data governance in different countries, and then particularly in the case of Japan, that the government really emphasizes the use of data for tackling some societal issues like disasters, and also the aging population in rural areas. So that is one thing which we can think about. And this is just an example of one case of a smart city, Kashionaha smart city, which is just outside Tokyo. And here, yeah, they are really trying to use this smart city by introducing different technologies like mobility, energy, and public space, and health and wellness. And especially here, the AI cameras for frailty and crime prevention. They try to encourage the participation in making the plans for how AI cameras can be used in the public space, so that they really try to encourage the citizens' participation in deciding on how to use AI cameras, and then for what purposes the AI cameras can be used. So this is also what I'm now working with my colleagues with further details and how exactly they're going to do this. Also, we've got the data governance, and then it seems to be that they are trying to link the private data platform for different applications like health applications and mobility and others, and also public data platform, which is maintained by the city government. And so this is still kind of ongoing process. So I think these kind of analysis would be useful in really understanding what exactly is going on in managing data in smart cities. So yeah, then the what I would like to mention at the end of my talk is that I think it's very important to establish a data governance system reflecting the local conditions and context. And essentially, they need to deal with a balance between the collecting using data for innovation and public purposes, but at the same time protecting the privacy and security. So as we saw that the like European countries, and they somehow try to use the idea of the data trust, independent data trust for data management, and or the allowing the use of data based upon the consent from citizens, and also more decentralized approach, which is taken by the Japanese government without really consolidating all the data. And then we can also think about the case of China, which is somehow places more emphasis on the government. And I'm actually now working with my students and colleagues in understanding what is really going on in data governance in China, although I didn't mention in my presentation today. So I think it's interesting to see how these different approaches to data governance will implemented, and then what are the impacts on the innovation and also the privacy and security. So there are many other issues, like to what extent that we could allow access to data held by private sectors for public purposes, which has become really critical challenge in the case of tackling COVID-19, for example, because private companies have a lot of data, but then to what extent that the government can have access to this data, and also now the climate change issue. And then the data sovereignty, which is also increasingly important because now, because of the current geopolitical situation, that many countries some try to argue for data sovereignty, so that in this context, how we can still facilitate cross-border data transfer for, because that's really facilitating the learning by machines, because if you have a lot of data, then we can facilitate learning. But at the same time, we also need to think about the coordination and standards practices. And then the to what extent that we can allow stakeholder participation and engagement in the local conditions, reflecting the values in the particular local environment. So that would be essentially dependent upon the trust in institutions, as many speakers they discussed. So that is really getting an important challenge in the coming years. So just as a practical approach in contributing to building trust, and I have been working with some of the colleagues in G20 Global Smart City Alliance, and then they are publishing model policy, and then one policy is privacy impact assessment. So I think this would be something I think quite useful. And then now this is tested in many cities, 36 cities in different countries, so that somehow the city officials can try to assess the new technologies and new services with regard to privacy impact, so that we can really evaluate what are the consequences of introducing new technologies with regard to the privacy. So we did this with some of the members from the different cities, and also some of the companies, and also government officials. So I think this would be one approach, that we introduce some actual policy instruments or the measures, and then try to test it, and then learn from each other by sharing all the experiences. So I think that kind of approach would be contributing to creating trust in all the measures introduced in smart cities. And then, sorry, finally, I just like to make this opportunity to little advertisement. And I'd like to really welcome contribution from any of you about papers for the frontiers in sustainable cities. And I have just taken a role of the chief editorial, chief specialty editor for innovation and governance. So I'd like to welcome the contribution of papers. And also, I'm currently editing special collection papers for data and policy, a journal, a new journal. And then that particularly, I'm collecting articles about data governance for innovation for sustainable smart cities. So I also want to welcome your contribution. And then the last slide, that I'm going to host the Data for Policy conference in December, particularly in Hong Kong, December 5th at HKST, with my colleagues in the UK and Seattle and also Brussels. So we really would like to discuss all the challenges about data and policy so that we can create a kind of community of experts working on this topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yarime. Yeah, by looking at the time, I think we should start the third paper. So may I have the next speaker, Professor Wilson Wong, to talk about trust-enabled data technology in smart city. The stage is yours.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Sure. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. This is I feel so excited to be here and present you a piece of my research. It is actually based on an article I'm currently revising for the special issue in China perspectives. Let me see. Okay, that will be better. So I'm presenting on the topic. I think most of you here in Hong Kong are quite familiar. It is the Live Home Safe app. It is a COVID-19 contact tracing app. In Cantonese, it's Onsam Chuhan. I believe now almost everybody in Hong Kong have one. So you have to be well familiar with that technology. So what is interesting about my paper, I think, is to try to set up a framework to understand why the Live Home Safe is not a very popular app in Hong Kong. I think that is quite ironic if you are a person outside Hong Kong. Hong Kong is so advanced in terms of smart city and all the ICT technologies. If you look at the mobile phone penetration rate, on average, we have more than one mobile phone, but the app is not very popular. So I believe it's not a secret for anyone of you here that it is not popular. But one of the contributions of my paper is to use a framework to analyze why it's not popular and how can it be reformed to make it more popular or well accepted, and it actually falls under the umbrella of the general understanding of how we can build a smart city in which it is actually data driven. So which is what you see is a general outline, and the framework I'm using is actually is a 3P framework. You start with process, performance, purpose, but I try to integrate it with another P, which is production. I can tell you more in a slide later on, but it is actually trying to integrate what we have been discussing for the whole day. It is how we can have good data governance. And production basically means similar to the idea of data governance, how to make sure people trust the data you're collecting. They trust that the person who owns the data, who collect the data, will not abuse the data at the expense of individual rights and other things the individual, the source of the data, the people who provide the data care about. So as I mentioned, the presentation or the paper itself is about building a framework to let us understand a little bit more about why the technology is not well accepted socially. And the framework is basically built on the technology framework about human trust in technology. I actually picked up the framework from an article in a journal called Government Information Quarterly. For those of you who actually study ICT, it is one of the major journals, particularly in the United States. So they have an article there with a framework about trust in technology, mainly about robotic technology. But I think the general idea can be applied to all kinds of technology, which we are actually going to use for the smart cities. So my general thesis, so that is what my major assumption or major points of argument here is all the technology basically have to go through a human technology interaction, which is not adopted, technology is not never adopted in the contextless outcome, so that it have to meet the expectations of stakeholders in society in order to become popular or to be adopted by people. And actually, if you look at the whole history of technology you mentioned, actually there are more technology that are socially rejected than those which have been accepted. That's a long list. I actually used to teach a course about that. And I create PowerPoint slides of failed technology, which my student actually really enjoy. But I'm not going to go through the long slides of failed technology here. So we need to emphasize when we talk about the technology acceptance, we need to look at both the technological capacities of the technology, but also the human needs and social dimension. So, but one very important is when we talk about social acceptance of technology, it is actually, when you look at the literature, it is definitely a social process about interaction between different participants, different human actors, but it is also a developmental, and I think that the last term is more important, is a manageable process. So if we want smart city, we want people to enjoy the technology, accept the technology, it's something manageable. It is not the case that if people don't like it, then the technology is there. There's a process in which we can focus on the key factors to make it more acceptable, so that all the people in society can enjoy the benefits of that technology. Okay, so and also related to the argument in my paper, I'm trying to argue that when we talk about smart city, I think there's no secret that it is actually a data-driven city. We talk about big data, we talk about especially where does the big data come from. It usually come from the IoT, Internet of Things. So basically when you talk about smart city, it's hard to imagine a smart city without the data. And usually when you talk about the data, it actually come from the citizens themselves. Because I actually argue, and I think when you look at, although there are many definitions of smart city, but most of the definitions will point to the fact that smart cities should serve the citizen. So they collect information from the citizens, provide service, usually personalized service to citizens themselves. So it's, smart city is data driven, and it is actually also trying to care for the needs of the people as well. And because people is the source of information to drive the operation of smart city, so it relates to the most fundamental concept we have been talking about for the whole day in this conference. It's about trust. When citizens don't trust the technology, and that's why the different safe is a very interesting example. People don't trust the technology, so they don't want to provide the real data to the government. Although it's actually illegal, so I'm not going to ask you to indicate whether you actually scan your phone when you go to the mall, which is actually legally required. So you can actually get a ticket from the police for a penalty of $5,000. But you can do your own survey. There's actually a memo. I'm going to cite it in one of the PowerPoint. They did a survey, which is a very simple study. They have a reporter standing at the entrance of the mall to look at how many people actually scan the Nippon Say. It is 10% or less. And you can do your own experiment yourself. and I will say you will be lucky if you got more than 10%. So my whole idea is to try to do a case study to build a framework to find out why people don't accept it. I think we already go through some of the major ideas about smart cities connecting things together to get the information flow then, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. So instead, I'm going to talk a little bit about this slide. We talk about trust. There are many definitions of trust. I usually think simplicity is the most important beauty. So I usually pick the most simple one in which everybody kind of agree on. So trust means the belief that others will not deliberately or knowingly damage or harm us. If they can avoid it, and will also look after our interests. So the first condition is they don't harm us. So they do not mean to do something bad. And if they can, they actually take care of us. So if you trust something, then you will give your information or even your life to the careholders so that to let them take care of you. And in terms of technology or in terms of the classification of trust, it's all from Newton. And actually, the literature is one of the key literature for this project, and I have to thank Professor Ko for recommending the literature to me. So there are three types of trust according to Newton. One is social trust, one is political trust. Political trust is vertical, so it's a top-down. Whether you trust your leaders up there to make the policies for you, that is political trust. Social trust usually means trust of your friends, your family. So it's kind of horizontal without a political or organizational hierarchy. And the second type of trust is trust in people or trust in institution. The third type of trust is faith trust. It means you actually know somebody. And the other type of trust, the versus the opposite of faith trust is thin trust. Means whether you have general information about certain groups and then trust them. So when we translate it into a technology introduced by the state, I would call the Live Home Safe is a state-introduced technology. It's not the mobile phone, not the Apple mobile phone in which you go to the store, you adopt it individually. It is imposed on you. You have to adopt it. But you can do something to try to, resist it. As mentioned by one of the speakers here, many people now in Hong Kong have two phones or three phones. Usually they have two, and now they have one specifically for Live Home Safe. So you actually can resist it. And while you resist it, if you take out the classification of trust and translate it into a technology, people don't trust the technology because they don't have enough political trust. Means they don't have trust on in the state, sufficient trust. They don't have trust in the institution. It means they may have doubts about the data governance. They don't think that when you give somebody the institution data, they protect it. And on the other hand, they don't have enough thin trust. Because you are not going to be a fan of the technology, right? They are fan. They are not a real person. But you can still have thin trust in that. In terms you know more about the technology. As I mentioned or argued by many programmers in Hong Kong, one of the criticisms of Live Home Safe is not open source. The government always say that, oh, just trust us. It's safe. We won't disclose your identity. We won't use your information for other purpose, which is not stated in some of the agreements. But you still don't have enough thin trust because you know so little about the code then behind, because it's not open source, using the term of the coders, of the programmers. So in order to translate those types of trust into a framework, then I have a 4P framework to talk about that. So I'm going to skip some of the PowerPoint because I think most of you already know about that. So and actually in this study, it is actually a case study with multiple sources of evidence. In terms of case study, you also try to trace the development of different events. In terms of in the political science, we usually call it process tracking methodology. So I kind of use multiple methods in this case in order to take out all the details, all the richness of the case. So if you look at the key events, if you look at of Live Home Safe, if you do remember it, it's actually introduced in November 11th, 2020. And at that time, it's already very unpopular. There's a Public Opinion Research Institute that was formally affiliated with the University of Hong Kong, but somehow it became independent for some reasons I will not discuss in them here. And they already found that 48% in December 2020, 48% of people actually don't want to make the different safe compulsory. But now it is compulsory. And when you look at the past 2 years after you have introduced, in addition to the Hong Kong U survey, there's another one done here in CHK. Actually, know people from the center, but I'm not the person who is in charge of that. People are quite negative about the contact tracing app. I think you can look at some of the number. 55 people regard the app unhelpful to stop the pandemic, and 50.4 citizens actually did not use or install the app before it becomes compulsory. So if people have a choice, more than half of them actually choose not to use it. But nowadays you now have no choice. The government actually dictate. Theoretically, you still have a choice if you stay home. Okay, so I have to modify my statement a little bit. If you stay home, you go nowhere, you knock yourself up in home and make yourself a prisoner of your home, then that's still fine. But in terms of being a functional person in Hong Kong, it's kind of mandatory because you actually need to use it to go into the shopping mall, go to the markets, go to the supermarkets. Actually, you almost need to survive if you want to be a normal citizen. But ironically, the reporters found out that in the press conference, just a few days, just a few days after the government made it mandatory for entering many facilities in Hong Kong, then in the press conference by the Department of Health, they say that even you scan your phone safe, you won't get any alert because at that time there are so many cases, and the Department of Health are so overwhelmed by all the workload, so they don't have time to send you an alert. Everywhere is dangerous. I think there are some of the comments made by the people in the similar comments made by the people in the press conference. So that's the survey I mentioned. In which less than 10 people are actually using it. So if you look at the newspaper, I'm sorry that we only have Chinese here because that member is a Chinese paper. So then they done the survey. The survey was done a month ago. Less than 10%. I personally observe it every day. I go to the mall every day. I go to Sati, Kowloon Tong. My observation is now even below 10%. So why is that? So I need to go to do the framework. Let me go to the framework. So when we do the framework, so we know there are 3 kinds of trust that is not sufficient thin trust, not sufficient political trust, and not sufficient institutional trust. So how can we make the people trust it more? So if you look at the literature, we actually have a literature with 3P: process, performance, purpose, and I add protection there with literature of data governance and data trust. So process just means people understand what's going on in there. But even for that, that different safe kind of fail it because first, not everybody actually understand coding. Secondly, even for the coding expert, they cannot look at the algorithm that is actually in the app. There's always rumors that there's backdoor there, so that and that's why I believe it is one of the speakers in the last session. People, it's very common. If you talk to your students, talk to your friends, many people now have a second phone, if not a third phone, for the new phone safe. They actually take out the SIM card. So they make sure that even if you scan the phone safe, they won't send something back to some website of somewhere, maybe in Hong Kong or in Beijing. Some people say maybe in Beijing, something like that. Nobody knows. The problem is nobody knows because it is not very transparent. So process is talking about understanding the process itself. You can think it as kind of similar to transparency. And performance means that you can prevent or solve problems. But as I say in the survey, and even for nowadays, where people feel that you can actually prevent the pandemic by using the app. So that's what we mean by performance. Does this solve the problem? And most people think that now it's more effective if you got the vaccination. And once you get the vaccination, just look at other countries, even you just look at Singapore. Once you have the vaccination, you can be 2 shots or 3 shots, and then they basically in Singapore they always get rid of most of the measures of contact tracing. But now Hong Kong is still having that. So many people think that performance is not good. of the app. And the purpose just means they know the scope, the objectives. It is also not very transparent. But this is the fourth dimension I would like to emphasize is the protection. Is the people feel that their data are being protected. I think probably not. The conclusion I got from I actually do a content analysis of newspaper reports. I didn't do an interview, but I basically summarize all the public opinion polls and all the discussion in the newspapers, which interview the citizens. Basically, people will kind of feel so worried about the data being taken by the state to do something they do not agree with. So I actually do the table in which I evaluate the four P's together, and I call the protection dimension the weakest link, in which we actually need to strengthen it institutionally. So instead of just making the technology better, I think just making the technology better does not address the problem, because people are not trusting the institution that use the technology. So because of time, I think I should wrap up my case. I think all the major points have been well stated. So I'm looking for, is there any new points? Okay, let me make this point, and then I just finish this presentation so that all the participants will have time to ask all the presenters, including me, any questions they have on mine. So the final question I have, because people, especially policymakers, the image including policymakers I talk with, they don't believe in social acceptance of technology. They just think that if they believe people at the top, I mean, they believe the app works, they just make it mandatory. So does it mandatory the adoption solve the problem of what we call the social acceptance of technology? My answer in the paper is no. People will have app or technology hesitancy, because if smart city have to work, you need to have data. Data have to accurate data. But people have so many. If they don't agree with the technology, they have so many ways to circumvent it. So just like people now have a third phone, you may not connected to the internet. So even you mandate the adoption of the technology, it doesn't make the technology better in fulfilling the purposes of smart city. So that's the first point I would like to make. And the last one is if you mandate something, you also defeat the purpose of smart city, because many literature, I will not say all of them, but many of the literature actually talk about smart city is a bottom-up process. You collect the views of the citizens, find out what they want, and then the government, you use the technology to fulfill the needs of the citizens. So the technology actually should serve the citizen. But if it is something good, the citizen will adopt them willingly instead of imposing on them by law. And so I think the different state case is a very good case in which we use mandatory adoption, but we actually do not see the app is working in the way we should. So I think I will just stop here so that people will have enough time to ask questions. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Wilson. So well, I believe everybody is forced to download this app and try to make use of it. Yeah, you are perfectly right, but we will see how the other people respond to you. Or do I have any questions from the floor on any of the three papers that we have been presenting?
Definitely has a question, I think.
Is it? Oh, definitely, you have raised your hand. I missed you. So go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question to Masaru. First of all, let me thank all the speakers in this section for sharing with us this fascinating presentation. For Masaru, I think as you pointed out, it's very important to establish data governance system to underpin or support smart city development. So I think my question is about Hong Kong. So where are we now in Hong Kong towards this ideal data trust governance or trust governance system? From previous presentation that we have today, we found that Hong Kong people many of them, they don't even know about the ideas of smart city. And they somehow, they form their own perceptions about smart city. And then from various surveys, we know that they concern about certain aspects of trust issues. And then I think in your presentation, you pointed out that there are indeed a wide range of possible approaches that we can adopt. And then my question is that where are we in Hong Kong? Are we just taking the baby steps? And then if we are still in the very early stage towards this ideal situation, so what would be the next 3 most important steps that we have to do in the very near term?
Thank you very much. That's such an important question. To be honest, I'm also trying to figure out what to be the best way to proceed in the context of Hong Kong. What I could mention at this stage is that probably I think it's very important that the citizens or residents see the benefits of smart cities in the sense that, for example, as I mentioned in the case of Japan, that they actually really emphasize the actual issues like aging population, how to deal with those elderly people. And then particularly, they are trying to emphasize that the needs for elderly people to visit the hospitals or clinics, but then that they often do not have transportation measures in rural areas because of now their population is declining. So often that it's very inconvenient to use buses or other measures. So they're trying to create a kind of system to link the data owned by hospitals and clinics about all the appointment to see the doctors, and then the transportation data owned by taxi companies, for example, so that they try to provide a service that the linking appointment time and also the transportation, so that then that really try to capture the needs, actually really serious needs on the local context. And also, I understand in the case of Barcelona, they focus on the garbage collection, collecting all the garbage in the local area. So that is not such a big thing, but still addressing the pressing needs in the local context. So I think in the case of Hong Kong, probably it's very important to show some really examples which demonstrates that the people can benefit from using some of the smart measures. So that really depends upon the local conditions. That would be really up to the citizens there. So probably it's important to start from something small. So in that sense, what you are going to do in this covering all the residents and the households, and then using the energy system. So I think that is really a good practice, and I'm really looking forward to what you get from this project. So I think that would be something that the Hong Kong might consider doing in the next stage.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I want to add my remarks also. Yeah, I'm doing research in tracking people and locating people. I bump into walls by saying that you are intruding somebody's privacy, they worry about whereabouts, and you're keeping track of them. Now, until I come up with a scenario by saying that it is for emergency purpose, or it is for emergency and rescue, and then you have particular cases by saying that there are missing people doing hiking and then missing for 2 days. And obviously, my technology can track them, at least give you some idea. Then nobody will argue about that. So until people are a little bit more educated, know what they want, until you have the right scenario, regardless how small it is or how practical it is, and we have the 2 or 3 minutes to tell them that this is very useful, then we can crawl one step closer to what we are going. So I think it is not just a technology thing, it is a social, and when you factor in the human factor, everything will be a little bit better. But I'm no expert on that. I just do my research and pinpoint how accurate it is and how precise it can be. So it is maybe up to you guys to lead the way by saying that how important it is, how useful it is, or summing it up with link it up with other cities by saying that, oh, we can interconnect and then we have a much better well than doing us alone. Then I think we have to find the right scenario and application to build the system. Any more questions?
Question from Ralph.
Can I ask a question to Calvin? Is that possible?
Sure.
Do we have enough time? So I'm Ralph Schuler from Germany, and I will introduce myself later on in the roundtable session. So thank you very much for the quite informative and well-prepared presentations. Thank you very much. And Calvin, you know that I like your work very much, and I appreciate your critical perspective on indicator systems. And my question is, do you have any indication in the cities probably you have analyzed that these cities use indicator systems as a tool for developing their own smart city strategy, or as a tool for kind of self-evaluation, for self-evaluating their activities? The background why I'm asking that is that we currently in Germany develop a kind of digital justice indicator, which has a twofold objective. The first objective is really try to compare and to rank cities, and the other is really to provide cities a kind of self-evaluating tool whether they are right on track with these activities. So do you have any indications that cities you analyzed use these indicators as or these indices as a kind of tool for developing or evaluating their own strategy?
Well, I would say, as I said before, I think the Smart City Index currently, they are always used to promote their city, like Singapore. Most of the Smart City Index, actually, they're developed from the organization from Singapore. And coincidentally, most of this kind of index, they rank Singapore as the best. So I would say some of the cities, they purely use these tools for city promotion. And probably, I'm not saying they might shape the definition of smart city in general internationally, but because more publications are from them. So for sure, they will have some influence and impact on, in general, the academia's smart city definition. But for like the self-evaluation tools, I would say the one which I evaluated before, the one called Cities Emotion Index from Spain, this index actually had an ability, had a function for the other cities to input their own city data on their website, so that they could calculate and kind of estimate how's their performance and their rank in comparison with all of their city data, which I think it could help the other cities to see how the performance right now, if they can self-evaluate by themselves, because like not all the cities have these resources. Like maybe some like rural cities, they cannot have all the resources to evaluate themselves if they are doing great in the smart city, and that's also kind of useless for those small cities to compare themselves with the big city. But they can use this kind of function from some existing smart city index, so they could at least have a reference for themselves to see, oh, okay, maybe if I want to develop into a like smart sustainable direction, I probably could learn these kind of features from the other cities, like something like that. So I would say that's helped for sure for some cities to self-evaluate, and hopefully they could also develop some tools which is especially for those background who obviously cannot be like compared with big city, large city, this kind of cases. Yeah.
Thanks, Calvin.
No problem. I have seen a question. I saw a question in chat room. Well, one of some indicators, some dimension, for example, like in the government dimension, some of indicators they capture like the future prospect of the government from their official published document, and also like how many revenue they have reserved for the smart city development, and also they also have to evaluate like how they engage the citizen to see how they perceive their cities as a smart city, or how the supportiveness from them. And I think those indicators, they are essential to capture like the city's future development into a smart city, and to also can map out their direction and see how can they concretely achieve what they want in the future. So like if they run, for example, like Mr. Terry Gannon asked if there's any indicators if the city runs living left. Yes, they do. It will be on the governance dimension, and it will be like the current ongoing project of the smart city from the government, like this kind of official data from the official document. Yes, that's also included. Yes, and thank you for the question.
Well, thank you. I'm aware of the time, so should we bring the panel to a close?
Yeah.
Okay, I can see nodding heads. So thank you very much for the very nice and interesting presentation, and I'll bring panel 3 to a close. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're